I'm not one that gets real nervous about certain things when it comes to animal ID, but when I get the question, when is ADT going to be done, I get a little bit nervous. And I get even more nervous when I get asked, what are you working on now since ADT is done? So it's always good to keep in perspective what ADT is and what it is not. ADT is not a full traceability system. Many of our competitors, international marketing competitors, have full traceability, where they trace the animal from birth through processing. Some folks take it all the way to the store shelf. So if we look at what we would have without ADT, or with no official ID, and yeah, this is focused pretty much from a cattle perspective, we would continue to obtain back tags, for example, on a carcass with TB lesions at slaughter, and initiate the trace going one direction back. Back tags do a great job getting us back to the market. Market records associate the animal to the consignor. Really pretty slick system from a back tag perspective. But then we go to the farm records and keep going back. So I look at ADT as a bookend system. We will still continue to trace an animal back using a back tag or official ID from the slaughter going back. But if we do things right, the point here that today can take us 6 months to get back to, we should be able to do that in minutes and trace forward from that point. Back from slaughter, forward from location first tagged. Would it be more ideal if we had the birth premises all the time? Probably so, eh? I say bookend plus system because we're also trying to find some points along the way, interstate movements. Now, from my simple perspective, we should be able to do a great job on having timely records for where the animal was officially identified. Populating this information, I think, is a little more challenging. But we need to make that a priority, and certainly the collection of ID at slaughter can be done extremely well with appropriate focus and attention. So the regulation, Part 86 of the CFR, supports the bookend system. Official ID for animals moved interstate, movement documentation. So to re-emphasize, if we're going to be successful in ADT, we need not only more animals officially identified, but we need the records to go with them. If we threw tags out across the entire country and that allowed us to tag every heifer, every steer, bovine animal out there, we would achieve nothing if we didn't have the records to associate where those tags went to. You know, we're a little bit unique. That's okay. Most other countries don't spend that much time and energy and effort on tracking a tag. They ask us, why do you track a tag? Shouldn't you be focused on tracking the animal? Well, if we required a producer to report birth date or birth information to a national database like a lot of countries do, we wouldn't have to track the tag. The producer would give us the identity of that animal, we'd know what premises the animal was born on, and everything would be great. But we take the approach, we're going to minimize the amount of burden to producers. So for ADT to be successful, yeah, we need more animals identified, but we need the records to go with that identification device to make that connection. If we don't do that well, we've done a lot for naught. And so tags applied pertains more to the accredited veterinarians. So the other piece of the bookend that we hear a lot of concern about is the collection of ID at slaughter. It seems like it should be a pretty simple thing to do, but we're going to have to put a lot of emphasis on this area because it has not been done well in all slaughter plants across the entire country. It would be, again, quite concerning if we go to all the trouble to identify animals at the farm and location, and when we collect a specimen or blood at the back end, that we have no ID to go with that sample. So we are putting emphasis on that. So the in-between points, again, to minimize the amount of burden to producers, we're trying to take advantage of interstate certificates of veterinary inspection. It is not a movement document. It's a document that highly correlates to where an animal is likely to move. But again, to minimize burden, take advantage of documents that already exist, we're relying a lot on ICDIs, ownership statements, other movement documentation that is acceptable when agreed upon by the shipping and receiving state is a great asset. Personally, I think from what I hear, there's a lot of challenges with the ownership statements that still need to be worked out. So what is the biggest challenge and concern now, a year later, that the dust has settled a little bit? Paul, what's the problem?
Too many agreements between states.
Too many agreements caused by what? We're too darn flexible. So here we are, guys. We've got to work through some of those pros and cons. At last year's USDA meeting, there was a resolution passed to help address some of the concerns. It's confusing for the industry, the stakeholders, to know what the heck I need to do to move these animals from one state to another. If we're committed to responding to the industry's need to do a better job in this area, there are opportunities, solutions to consider. A working group brought 4 options or 3 options back, highly recommending one option as being the most ideal to respond to this. We talk a lot about moving animals at the speed of commerce. The worst thing we can do in ADT is make it difficult to support commerce, the movement of animals in interstate. The manual recording of official ID numbers. I doubt if anybody's surprised that this is a concern. But it's actually more quiet yet today than I expected it to be at this point in time. But as we move down the road with enforcement, I think we'll hear a little bit more about it. Today, when you're loading out a load of cattle, you can no longer put a second identification official tag on those animals, i.e. a second noose tag on an animal that already has a noose tag. You can add an 840 tag, visual or electronic, to an animal that's already officially identified.
Neil, but just a comment about that. You're supposed to read the other ID and keep the record for 5 years.
Thank you very much. Very important point of clarification. Not only can you do that, but you have to marry those 2 numbers. So that doesn't save you at that point in time any time to add that extra tag. It's for the efficiencies you gain afterwards. We talked about the administration of owner shipper statements, other movement documents, compliance to the regulation I'll talk a little bit more about, and I'll also talk a little bit more about traceability test exercises that we're, to be real honest with, struggling to adequately get done. So our immediate priorities for ADT is to continue to make official ID easier. Tags distributed to producers. Last fall, when we did the survey to all the states, 37 of the 41 states responded, said they're making tags directly available to producers. I think that's a good thing. We still have to get the right information for where those tags went. I know there's concern about proper placement, but I think we can train people to put tags in ears and integrate it into their day-to-day herd management practices and be very effective. Tagging sites, those that are unable to tag their own animals, 34 of the 41 states at that time said yes, they are using tagging sites, and today we have over 19 approved tag manufacturers making over 67 official identification ear tags. The majority of those are 840 tags, but there are noose tags, there's swine tags. On the 840 side, I haven't calculated it specifically, but I would estimate 2/3 of the 840 tags are probably electronic tags, or at least half of them. And different technologies within the electronic tags. Maybe that's good, and some of you might think it's not so good. We want to do a better job getting the numbers recorded on movement documents. We need to make it more easy to understand what tag is official. We still get calls every week on, is this tag an official tag? In the future, 1 year, less than 1 year from today, when a tag is applied to an animal, for it to be official, it must have the U.S. shield on it. If you guys are if you have tags, especially the noose tags, in your inventory that do not have the U.S. shield on them, I think it's of benefit to throw them away. The sooner we stop putting those out to accredited veterinarians, the better. They're not that costly. We've got a good inventory in the Kansas City warehouse to adequately supply anybody that needs noose tags with the U.S. shield on them. The other part that I think will help improve the usability or clarify which tags are official will be the transition to 840, away from 900 series tags and USA prefix. So again, March of next year, no more, Adam. USA tags, and I was glad to hear that Holstein is a leader in animal identifications, converting to 840. And I'm glad, and I hope everybody makes that conversion sooner than later. The sooner producers are putting 840 tags in the ears, the better. So the USA prefix and the 900 series prefix tags will no longer be official March of 2015, and that is when tags applied after March. If they put the tag on earlier, it's official for the life of the animal. So yeah, we'll have some confusion. Was that animal tagged on or before March 11? We probably won't know, but we'll have a pretty good record of what 900 series tags were manufactured before and after a certain date. So we'll have some opportunity to check that, but it's a transition period. Another key priority is the training of our accredited veterinarians. A training module will be put in place this fiscal year for a national vet accreditation program. All of our training modules, Dr. Weimers is providing the content, but the actual process of formulating that into the training module is done by Iowa State. A little spiel on traceability performance standards before we get into enforcement, and I'll try to hurry up so I don't take too much time. These were developed by the original working group that developed content for the proposed rule. So it's nothing new. It's not something staff dreamed up back in Riverdale or anyplace else. It was done through a working group, which included state animal health officials, ABICs at the time, and other staff members. But it aligns with that chart of being a bookend system. What state received the tag? That state then needs to have a record of what producer received the tag. The movement of an animal. From which state was the animal shipped? So Bill, you have an animal that's in a trace exercise. It doesn't have one of your tags on it from Minnesota. So you need to determine what state shipped the animal to Minnesota. If you find that you got that animal from South Dakota, Dustin, are you here? Different meeting. South Dakota needs to be able to determine what location did the animal leave, or what location was it shipped from when it went to Minnesota or when it left their state. Those are 4 very simple, very basic activities that we're going to measure. They're not a full traceability measurement. We're not measuring how long it takes to complete a trace. These are the 4 activities that are associated with a traceback. Regardless of what the issue is, these are typically 4 activities that need to be done. So 1 and 2, as I said, indicated through the tag distribution records. 3 and 4 are the interstate movements. So they align with that bookend plus system. States are to complete the appropriate number of trace exercises as part of their cooperative agreements. Included in their report that ends, the cooperative agreement period ends, or did end, at the end of March. So with your final reports, we need those tracing exercises, because those measurements will be used to establish national baseline values. So we're hoping, and I'm pretty optimistic, that 2-3 years down the road, the time it takes today to determine where a tag was distributed to becomes less, but more importantly, we are able to do it more consistently. I get the sense there's a lot of times where we can't even find the record of where the tag went to. We can't just focus on news tags, but we also have to examine our ability to do that with 840 tags. So that really supports the principle that we are a performance-based program. Pretty basic, isn't it? Measuring the time it takes to determine where a tag was allocated to. Is it valuable in a traceback event? I think so. Not going to spend a lot of time on it, just acknowledgement that we do have a tag retirement project going on at Ames. We're going to be shipping the tags from the Kentucky lab that are collected with blood samples. After they're done there, will get shipped to Ames. One of the buildings there is being retrofitted for a tag retirement center. Not a large percentage of the tags, but enough to evaluate the feasibility of doing this. How much will it cost to do that? Based on that cost, is it practical to do that? So that in the event there is a trace, we're not spending time looking for dead animals. So it's really a feasibility study. The other area, just an FYI, we are revising 7120 of the CFR in regards to approved livestock facilities. It's been outdated for quite some time, kind of modernizing it, but in essence it's the same type of principle, but we need it to support ADT, because if animals are moved to an approved livestock facility, they qualify for certain exemptions. Moving direct to slaughter through one approved livestock facility, they can move to a livestock facility on an owner-shipper statement. So there's merit in bringing that forward. Proposed rule should come out this fall. Just an FYI. So there's been a lot of discussion about when's the Fed's going to do something about compliance. There's, I think, some interest in now, a year after focusing entirely on education and communication, that we move into this area. So within the last several weeks, many people saw the notice or stakeholder communication that came out from Kevin Shea, the APHIS administrator, acknowledging that now if a person continues to violate a regulation, we will consider, when appropriate, to issue penalties. And again, repeat offenders. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, and if there's questions or comments, don't hesitate to interrupt, because I know there's a lot of interest in this area. So from our clarification, who is responsible? This is a federal regulation, so APHIS Veterinary Services is directly responsible for the enforcement of the traceability regulation. This is not any different than other federal regulations. Within each district, the assistant district directors are the leads on making sure that key aspects of the regulation are covered and that we have a uniform approach. Critical to this is support of the state and their cooperation. I think it's ideal to hear Charlie talk about their opportunity to work as one in Tennessee and our APHIS folks, a real partnership. At the same time, I realize that not every state has that opportunity. In some states, they found it necessary to distance themselves for political reasons from ADT. And so I understand that certainly when we can work in partnership with the states, that's a win-win, and especially when a state has duplicated the same type of regulations. So we say APHIS is directly the lead or specifically responsible. The degree to which the states work cooperatively needs to be established at the local level. How can the state and our area or assistant district directors work cooperatively together? So I hope that is clear. Over the last couple of years, we've brought this document along, animal or ADT monitoring and compliance document. It was really developed to help establish some degree of uniformity so that if we're looking at this issue in one state, it's appropriate to consider the same type of violation across the entire country. So what are we going to focus on? The same key result areas that we need to do well. Official identification, proper administration of ICBIs, and collection of ID at slaughter. We've had a lot of discussions on a lot of the gray areas at the ADT forum last fall, August, Denver. I think we spent 3/4 of the time on owner-shipper statements. And I'm not sure we have that any more clear today. I think in some areas we do, but in some areas we do not. So we don't need to muddy the water trying to enforce compliance with owner-shipper statements. We just, need to work out the processes and communicate where the state, where we're at. So, because I get a ton of questions. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? It doesn't sound like we're ready to enforce because there's a lot of areas that aren't very well defined. Well, I'm convinced that if we waited till every area was defined, we'd never get started. Pretty clear cut. When an animal moves interstate, it must be officially identified unless it qualifies for an exemption. We got to get the animals appropriately identified. Cattle, of course, are the priority. Talked about tag distribution records, proper administration of ICBIs. The requirements are very clearly now defined in the CFR what must be completed by the accredited veterinarian on the ICBI. We now are in a position to reprimand accredited veterinarians if they do not properly complete an ICBI. That has not always been the case prior to the ADT regulation. To help, and again it's still probably needing some clarification, official identification numbers of each animal, unless the requirement is specified on the ICBI, we need to make sure the numbers are properly recorded. The shipping and receiving state gets the agreements or the certificates. So our folks at the local level need to coordinate with you all at the state level on how the oversight of those ICBIs are going to be looked at. You guys going to red flag them and send them over to the district director? We're not going to say this is how it's got to be done. You guys at the local level with the ADDs figure that out, but it's got to be looked at very carefully. Hopefully we can do better than this. I think there's a compliance issue here maybe, but maybe as much as anything, little communication with appropriate accredited veterinarians. We are going to continue to make this a priority. Our folks are going to be visiting slaughter plants to monitor compliance on the collection of ID at slaughter. We'll be working with FSIS. They're still the lead on this, but we're going to work cooperatively with them and preferably through them when there's issues of non-compliance. And just to reemphasize, we're looking at quarterly visits by our folks into these plants. Plants that are out of compliance will probably be visited more frequently. Over time, those that have high levels of compliance, other arrangements can be considered. Within the document that I referenced earlier, there is what we call a checklist for our folks to consider as they're making those visits at the slaughter plant. Again, to make sure that when we go to a plant in Pennsylvania, we're being pretty thorough and complete, but we're following the same protocol in a plant in California, because we want that information collected uniformly in all plants. Within the document that we refer to as the monitoring and compliance document, there's some key pages on pages 11 through 14 that cover the information listed on the slide. Overview and guidelines for non-compliance. It explains the initial evaluation of alleged violations, determination of the seriousness of the violation. I repeated one. The enforcement and compliance actions. Again, not in great detail, but it provides some sense of clarity on when there is a violation, how we then work with our investigative and enforcement services branch of APHIS to carry penalties forward. We've got to do a good job, our eyes and ears, and observing violations, and then working to document those, to document that there is a violation to a regulation. And then our folks from IES get involved. So in summary of the compliance items, ongoing priority is to continue to inform stakeholders of the regulatory requirements. That's going to be an ongoing priority, because I'm sure we'll run into it today on folks that probably still haven't heard of it.